Excuse me 1 minute. I'm gonna get a glass of water just so I have it. I'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. We'll start in a few minutes. We're a few minutes away from 7.
Yeah, you can watch it. Yeah, yeah. I'll send you the link. All right, I'm back.
What was the last show you saw at CBGB's before it closed? You remember? Either of you?
Mine was Sonic Youth, actually. They did a show there in I think when they put out Rather Ripped, so like 06, so it's probably right when it closed. They did like a return to CB's thing. How about you, Pat?
I'm going to have to say the last time I was there, I played there. The B-52s did a little run of sort of rehearsals, and then we played at that kind of farewell week. But I don't remember who else I saw. I just remember playing there.
Wow.
You remember a band called Hagatha?
I do not.
My coworker, she had a regular job, but she was the drummer. She was the original drummer for the Beastie Boys. Her name's Kate Schellenbach, and then she was in Luscious Jackson.
Oh, wow.
And she had a part-time job at a photo agency where I worked. So we would everyone from the photo agency would go to watch Kate, and she was in this band called Hagatha that was really funny. The lead singer had an Andy Warhol wig on. It was really funny. And then she was in the Lunatics.
Then she was in Luscious Jackson, right?
Yeah, Luscious Jackson.
I love them. They were great.
They were great.
I did too. I like that band a lot.
I think they've done some reunion stuff. She's a good drummer. She's done a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And you're still in touch?
We're Facebook, people. She's more of a colleague than someone that I stayed in touch with, but I always loved Luscious Jackson. And she had this apartment on 14th Street that you could ride a bike in. It was one of those lofts.
Wow.
You have like 500 people there.
Oh, wow. Those are the days.
Yeah, it was fun. All right, well, it's 7 o'clock, so I think it's time to start, everyone. And I know people will come in late, and that's okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jocelyn O'Zolins from the Shelter Island Library, and thank you for coming. I'm very excited about tonight. I think we're in for a special night with David Browne and Pat Irwin. They'll be talking about New York City's downtown music scene of the late 70s and early 80s, among other things. And just some brief information about David Browne and Pat Irwin. David Browne is a senior writer at Rolling Stone magazine, where he's done cover stories on Bob Dylan, Adele, and Whitney Houston. He's also written for the New York Times, Spin, the New Republic, and Time. And he's the recipient of a Music Journalism Award for Criticism. He's also the author of several critically acclaimed and best-selling books on such groups as Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, The Grateful Dead, Sonic Youth, Tim Buckley, and other topics. And Pat Irwin has had a very eclectic career, both as a performer on keyboards and guitar and as a composer. You've probably heard his music on television or film soundtracks, independent films, cartoons such as SpongeBob, and programs like Nurse Jackie on Showtime. He recently completed music for National Public Radio's This American Life, and he was a founding member of Eight-Eyed Spy and the Ray Beats, and performed and recorded with the B-52s. His current band, Sus, has released a new record called Promise, and he currently teaches film and TV music composition at Brooklyn College and NYU. And with that, I'll hand you over to David Browne. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you very much.
Great to be here. How are you doing, Pat?
I'm good, David. It's good to see you.
Likewise.
And we're at the virtual library.
It is. We're honored to be here, and just want to say thanks to Terry and Jocelyn, everyone at the library. Pat and I have been there each been there many times, and we can't wait for it to kind of fully reopen, like in the past. And we were both honored to be asked to participate in this. And Pat, I think when I was first approached to do this, I thought, wow, that sounds a lot of fun, and there's probably so many things we could talk about. And then, I was just putting our kind of mutual timelines together, and I realized we both came to New York from different places right around the exact same time. The very end of the 70s, you came in to be a musician, and I was to be a college student. And, I flashed back on that moment in New York City, late 70s into early 80s. And what a sort of magical time it was. Of course, that was a period, when people were putting the city down or saying it was so dangerous and dirty and grungy. And yet, you look back on it, and the plethora of, the way the art scene, especially downtown, was exploding. There were so many clubs, so many bands. You had the overlapping of music and art, and people like Basquiat and graffiti culture, and hip hop was starting. Some of those folks were down there as well. And I thought, well, it would be kind of fun to talk about that and pick your brain as someone who was such an integral part of that. And it seemed like, especially now that we're in a pandemic, and obviously, and there hasn't been live music in New York in over a year, and it might be kind of nice to just remember a time, which will hopefully return.
Yeah.
When all that did happen.
Yeah. When I was living actually in Paris, and there was only one place for me, and it was time for me to come back to the United States, and there was only one place to be, and that was New York City. And the main reason was because of the music scene. And on really to put an exclamation point on it, all I wanted to do was play either CBGB's or Max's Kansas City. And I got to play both. And that's really all there was to it. It was just alive with places to play. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it was pretty grungy, and rents could be, you could find an affordable place to live, and you could find places to play. It was magical.
Let's blow people's minds with what we paid for rent. I remember my first apartment on East 18th Street, but where was yours, and what did you pay?
Well, I had a 3,000 square foot loft in the Flower District, where we rehearsed with Lydia Lunch and Eight-Eyed Spy, and among other places. So, and I think it was $600, but I remember that I couldn't afford it. I had two roommates, so it's $200 each, and I couldn't afford it. So we split it in half. So I had a 1,500 square foot loft. But then I soon moved down to a loft in Tribeca, again, about 1,500 square feet, and it was just a couple $100.
Wow. Now, you said you came from Paris, but before that, give us a little quick condensed story of where you came from, and what kind of music you sought to play in New York from before Paris.
Well, I grew up in the Midwest, and I went to college in Iowa, and I did not play music I played sporadically, and I played professionally. I would go on small tours, or while in college, I would play at the Holiday Inn down by the interstate. But it never really occurred to me that it was something to do. It was just as for, as a career or as a life choice. It was just, I always just did it. I always just seemed to be playing. but never thought of it as like an original band. And then I was lucky enough to go to Paris, and I lived for a year, and I had a research grant, and I was doing work on American expatriate jazz musicians. And I met quite a few, and it was an eye opener. I mean, you know, I was making friends with people that I admired, and real working musicians. Steve Lacy comes to mind, Mal Waldron, just great jazz musicians. I met some writers and artists. Brian Geisen was one of them, who introduced me to William Burroughs, and they introduced me to the composer John Cage, who was giving workshops. And of course I knew who John Cage was, but I could never in a million years imagine, you know, studying with him. And then we performed a little bit at the American Center, which is part of the workshop. And that just opened up a complete new world for me of you know, and I wouldn't call it rock and roll, but it had that, it had a pretty, it had a spirit about it that combined elements of chant and freedom, and yet, you know, it had discipline as well. And so when I came back to New York, I had stopped in New York before I went there, but when I came back to New York to live, I kind of had that frame of mind in my mind. But yeah, I grew up playing all sorts of things. I would play country music. I played in high school. I played with older guys, you know, who had a band. They were kind of known as, you know, when they were hippies and greasers, and these guys were kind of like greasers, and they knew all the cool rock and roll tunes, and I learned a lot of them. You know, like, I don't know, Flip Flop Fly, and, you know, just rockin' tunes. And it was just a real rock outfit, you know. So I had that going on too.
You play multiple instruments, and with varying bands, you play guitar, keyboard, sax. What was your focus when you came to New York? Was there one instrument you mostly were focusing on at that point?
Well, by that time I was sort of, I would do whatever it took, to be honest with you. Yeah. It didn't really matter. I played guitar, mostly guitar, at that point. And then Lydia Lunch found out that I played clarinet, or maybe I told her. I don't really remember exactly that detail, but she was like, "Oh, well, let's use that." And I was like, "We can't do that, you know." But I still have my clarinet, and I still play it, and I love it, and I use it from time to time on soundtracks.
Yeah, let's set the scene for people. You mentioned Lydia Lunch, who was a totally charismatic and important player on that scene in New York in the late 70s, and part of what many people called no wave, which was a particularly intense kind of primal rock and roll, kind of almost stripping it down to really even beyond punk. And you were part of one of those bands with Lydia called Eight-Eyed Spy. And yeah, tell us, how did you end up in that band?
Mutual friends.
Okay.
But there was a record that came out called No New York that I know you know. That had the Contortions, Teenage Jesus, Mars, and DNA were on it. And I just I remember when that record came out, and it just changed me forever. And shortly thereafter, I saw the Contortions play, and that band, and this music wasn't for the faint-hearted. It was not for everyone. It's pretty rough, and it felt like the city, though, or at least part of the city. And it felt like this was really something amazing. When I saw Lydia Lunch play guitar, I couldn't believe it. It was
What
like,
about it? What do you mean?
well, it was like she completely stripped it of any rock and roll vocabulary and made it her own. And same with Pat in the Contortions, and Jody to a certain degree. I mean, in the Contortions, they just took the vocabulary of the bands that were playing in New York at that time. Of course, we know them now, like Ramones, Talking Heads, Television, Blondie. They took that vocabulary, which was already special and unique, further. And when you didn't think it could go any further. And I wanted to be a part of that. And
how startling. Did you know that scene was even happening when you came to New York?
Not really. I knew Television and Richard Hell and the Voidoids. And particularly, I knew a band called Suicide. And when I think of the sound of New York City at that time, and particularly the sound of CBGBs, that's the band I think of. There were lots of other bands, punk bands playing. I think some were uncomfortable with that term, punk rock, but Suicide was like the one that just, there were really 4 or 5 people in CBGBs, and I'm not so sure they all stayed, or maybe it ended up with that many. But no, I didn't really know about that music before I got to New York.
Right. And talk about what were some of the early shows you played, whether it was with whatever bands that was, Eight Eyed Spy or someone else.
I played in a band that had, before Eight Eyed Spy, I played in a band called the Foolish Virgins, and we played like 3 or 4 shows. And the first one I think was at Folk City, and then at a small club on St. Mark's Place called Club 57. And we were playing at the end of a run of a play written by Patti Smith and Sam Shepard called Cowboy Mouth. And we were like the after party or something like that. I don't know exactly. But and then that band played up in Toronto at about the same and we were the promoter I'm still in touch with, great legendary promoters, the Garys, Gary Topp and Gary Cormier. And we played at the Horseshoe, I believe, which was a club where I think the Contortions had just played, and maybe when they were leaving the hotel, we were coming in, and I kind of saw them. I kind of saw them for the first time. But my first shows were at Folk City and Club 57. And then the first shows with Eight Eyed Spy were at Tier 3 and Max's Kansas City in the Mud Club. Those they come to mind quickly.
What was the experience like of being on stage with Liddy and Eight Eyed Spy and playing that music, and how would the audiences react to such an intense experience?
Yeah, maybe some people in the audience might who I saw somebody who I know was there, but I just had never worked with anyone like her. She was not like a standard entertainer. And she didn't do anything to engage the audience from my perspective, other than just be herself. Now, the reputation that Eight-Eyed Spy had amongst some like Sonic Youth and, were that we were, some people thought of us as kind of conventional rock and roll band, but, we really weren't. And so, to be honest with you, working with Lydia was a little scary.
Right.
It was a little bit weird. People, she raised up a lot of emotions from the audience. People wanted to get close to her. Yeah, somebody just mentioned Patti Smith, who I knew I'd forget one of them, but yeah, those were the bands that Patti Smith, the Ramones, Television, Talking Heads, and Richard Hell and the Voidoids and Blondie were all sort of that core group that just made New York alive, a place we wanted to be. And then when we came up with the bands that I'm mentioning from New York, DNA, Mars, Contortions, and Teenage Jesus, it just took that to another place altogether. But I hope I didn't veer off too far there. Working with Lydia was a trip.
Yeah, I remember interviewing her for my Sonic Youth book because she played a part in that. She wasn't in the band, but she was, friends with Thurston and Kim and so forth. And when I was talking with her about Spy and her music back then, I mean, she basically said, she thought someone like Patti Smith was too conventional, that she just wanted to destroy rock and roll. She said she thought the guitar was like the most disgusting instrument in the history of music.
Yeah.
It was this whole idea that that there were no rules basically anymore.
Right.
Even more so than punk. It made the Ramones. The Ramones were a great pop band in a lot of way, but yeah, like you said, you guys kind of took it this one step further. And what was the way? I always wonder, like, did people from record companies come down and check you guys out? Did you even think that was a possibility?
No. I mean, there was a couple small independents, but when we made a record, it was really left of center, and really independent. I don't think when I read back about stories about let's just say Seymour Stein at CBGB's and checking the scene out, I'm not so sure that record companies wanted a whole lot to do with us. I mean, one look at those faces on the back of No New York, you're not going to want them in your living room. But at the same time, I think that we were part of a rock and roll line. I mean, when Lydia, I'm on a level with you about her. She wanted to be in a band. She wanted a break from Teenage Jesus, and she wanted to change. And little did I know that was the way she did things all through those years. She would move on quickly, but she wanted to be in a band, and she wanted to put it over. She wanted to be good. She didn't treat it lightly. She worked really hard. I mean, she's still around, so she's serious. She's a serious artist.
Right. What did you guys think of the no wave tag? Was that just a media thing, or did you? I always wondered what you thought of that.
I don't think I thought about it too much. I mean, I remember Lydia saying, it came up like through Brian Eno, who produced No New York.
Right, exactly.
And I think they were trying to find a name for the record, which I am not on, but they wanted to find the name for the record. And I think Lydia's idea was something to the effect, it was like, no Eno, no record, or something like that. And And then from there, it became No Wave. I don't know. It worked for me.
Right,
I never
right,
thought about it too much.
right, right. What did you think of New York at the time? I mean, it was, I mean, when you and I were talking a week or two ago and just reminiscing, I remember like saying I was in college at NYU at the time, and it was very exciting, but at the same time, it was a little like dangerous. I mean, I remember, I think I told you a friend of mine went to the Mud Club to see some band and got stabbed outside by some crazy person, but was that kind of inspiring in any way? Like the way the city, like you said, the city almost felt like it was falling apart, and you guys were almost reflecting that in music. So was there something inspiring almost about the city at that point?
Absolutely. I mean, it was like being in, I mean, the energy was, it's just, you couldn't deny it. And there was, you know, the subways were just not the way they are now. You know, it was pretty dark. They didn't work all the time. There's a lot of graffiti, but I found that really inspiring. You know, not dangerous really. I mean, I didn't really, I got, every once in a while you kind of know you're in the wrong place. You're walking down the street and it's just, you shouldn't really be there. But sometimes you would walk down the street and it'd be the wrong place. And at the end of the block would be a club that you've been hearing about for weeks. And, all of a sudden you go inside and it's the most magical place on the planet. I mean, it was just a great place for live music and art. And so it was very inspiring. I mean, there was a bar up in Times Square, and you would never necessarily call Tin Pan Alley. No. Oh shoot, I forgot the name of it right now. But you wouldn't necessarily hang out in Times Square, but you certainly hung out in this bar. And people that we know that we've been talking about would be there. Some people worked there as cooks, and I mean, it was just magic. It was just magic.
Right, right. And then, of course, soon after you were in the Ray Beats, which was another classic New York band of a very different type, an instrumental band. You were called the New York Surf Band, which was a little simplistic. But what was the motivation behind that band?
The three other guys in the Ray Beats were in the Contortions, so George Scott, the late George Scott, had been would left the Contortions first, and shortly in the middle of the recording of the By Contortions record, and he remained friends with the other two guys, and they just had this love of instrumental rock and roll. And George was working in a record store called Musical Maze up off of 23rd Street and maybe 2nd Avenue, I think. And people started to come in and ask for 12-inch records, which were just starting to happen, these dance remix records. And on the B side, sometimes it would be instrumentals, and there were samples. And one of the samples on one of the first records that caught George's eye was a sample from a tune called Apache, a classic rock instrumental,
right.
And rock and roll instrumental. And bless George's heart, he was sort of like thinking like, well, shoot, we could do that. Let's do that. And really it was just very innocent. Just let's have a rock and roll, instrumental rock and roll band. And we all love that music, whether it was, I mean, George had an encyclopedic knowledge of instrumental music. I mean, he had every Link Ray single, to the Pyramids, and then we I love the big ones like Booker T and the MGs and the Ventures. It wasn't just surf music; it was just Link Ray, I mean, those early Link Ray records, all of those Link Ray records, you know, that just really rewrote the book on what a rock and roll band could be. And to be honest with you, we were a little sick of singers. And it was, you know, it was an opportunity to maybe not be in a band with Lydia or James Chance, or Lydia Lunch. You know, it was like, let's do something a little bit different. So we just gave it a go.
Yeah, and you were there for like, you know, you guys played the Ritz, which I'm pretty sure I saw you open for someone. I saw many shows at the Ritz, which is now like 40 years ago. Hard to believe.
Yeah, right.
But that seemed like, I mean, I remember going there to see bands, and it was like even right before MTV started, and you would come before the bands would come on, they'd be playing music videos on that big screen, and
Oh yeah.
you'd see like Peter Gabriel videos or whatever, things like that you would never see on TV, and then you'd see bands like yours, and again, it was just like it felt like you were entering this whole other world.
Yeah. Well, that whole thing with, you know, video DJs or VJs,
Right.
you know, was really, you know, I'm still in touch with a couple who have called the night clubbing, Emily Armstrong and Pat Ivers, and thankfully they shot video from all that time. And those clubs, whether it's the Ritz or particularly Danceteria, later the Peppermint Lounge, they all sort of had these visual components. But yeah, the Ray Beats, I don't know how we did it. I know, you know, we had somebody who got us the gigs, but you know, we got on an airplane, Eastern Airlines, and with a pass, and we would play 30 cities in 30 days, and we went around the block. And we played a lot of shows, and you know, now I look back and go, wow, how did that happen?
What was your biggest gig in terms of opening for a major headliner? Do you have any of those experiences?
Well, my favorite memory is really opening for James Browne.
Oh, wow.
And I remember that I remember walking on the street after we played that show, and somebody recognized me from the gig. We played at Bonds.
Oh, wow. In Times Square, right?
Yeah. At Times Square, just maybe a day or two before the Clash did their run.
Those are legendary shows for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and rightfully so. And so this guy comes up to me and he goes, and I was just I didn't know what you know, New York being a little bit edgy, you know, I didn't know what this was going to be. And he goes, yeah, I saw you last night. And he goes, my girlfriend liked you. I was like, well, that works for me. You know, if you're going to say that. It was pretty intimidating, but we had a great run opening for the Go-Go's at the Whiskey in LA around New Year's when Valentine was playing our first shows. The first time I ever saw the Go-Go's opened for Eight-Eyed Spy, and Lydia liked them. But
I have to say, I don't know I ever knew that. The Go-Go's opened for Eight-Eyed Spy.
Yeah.
Where was that? In New York or LA?
LA.
Okay. That's
maybe a small club in San Francisco, but we definitely played with them. And it wasn't too long before I think we opened for them. And the Ray Beats definitely did a lot of shows opening for the Go-Go's. Right. You know, at the Whiskey, the Ray Beats played with, we opened for the Stranglers in Toronto. We opened for Susie and the Banshees. We did a lot of good shows.
Did you actually get to meet James Browne?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Tell us about that.
It was terrifying. I think it was part of his part of the deal. He liked to basically somebody took one of his handlers just said, Mr. Browne would like to meet you, or we'll meet Mr. Browne. I think it was, and he was getting his hair done, and he carried around. He had a chair, the whole setup.
Wow.
And it was nerve wracking, and I'm a big James Browne fan, and so it was very brief. It's not like we had a long conversation, and pretty short and sweet, but it unforgettable.
Right. Wow. What about other? I mean, the downtown music scene attracted, like as we were saying, lots of artists and stuff, and like Jean-Michel Basquiat was around a lot. Was he someone you would see?
I'm sorry, who?
Basquiat.
Oh yeah, I mean, he painted the DJ booth at Tier 3, and he had a band. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they were called Gray.
I think you're right. I'll have to double check that.
Yeah, but
it's been confirmed by one of our panelists.
Oh, great!
Right, yeah.
And so he was just a bright light. I wouldn't pretend to know him, say that I knew him, but I definitely remember him being around. And I remember him being a DJ. He would DJ from time to time, it was just, painters were part of the vocabulary, whether it was Keith Haring or Kenny Scharf. They seemed to be in bands or know people in bands, or we knew them, and it was just all made sense. It just all kind of landed in the same place.
Yeah, it's one of the fascinating things about that scene is the overlapping of the scenes, right? Artists might be in bands and vice versa. Richard Price was in one. I mean, it was just like, there again, like that's. I remember many people when I was researching my sonic youth book were calling it like the Paris in the 20s kind of situation, but downtown, just this incredible intermingling of artists doing just all new work.
Yeah, I mean, there were places to play, to perform, like the Kitchen comes to mind, and we would play in art galleries too. Art galleries would book bands, and we would it was just a place to play. But it didn't take much for other people who didn't necessarily play rock music, but I remember Philip Glass playing on bills of Philip Glass. But even the bands like Glenn Branca or Rhys Chatham come to mind, and jazz. Just everybody would sort of play at these venues at the same time, and you really wouldn't think twice about it. It wasn't like anybody put up, had rules. It was just, it was Philip Glass he made music that worked in those clubs, and people went to go see him there, as well as whether or not he would play at the Kitchen or the Judson Church or La Mama or the other places that he would be playing. People were playing at the same time, and and it just all kind of mixed together.
Yeah, Philip Glass produced a record by the Ray Beats that just recently emerged. And how did that collaboration come together?
Oh, I mean, well, again, a mutual friend, and Don Christensen. There was a new Philip through his wife at the time, Rebecca Littman, and Rebecca was friends with Philip, And then eventually Philip had moved his studio to the building I was living in Tribeca. So he was 2 floors below me.
No.
And you know, and I think it's in your Sonic Youth book that you mentioned the Nova Convention.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Philip borrowed my keyboard for that, and then he just, I think he just wanted to expand what he was doing, and he said, "I want to produce, you know, I want to produce you guys." I mean, I think it was as simple as that. But he wasn't a producer like a Phil Spector kind of producer. It was, you know, he came with, like, he listened to us. We played a couple tunes that we wanted to do, and then he would say, "Well, I have an idea," and he just sort of integrated what he did into our music, and it was really thrilling, to be honest with you.
Oh wow, yeah, that must have been. Was that a certain kind of validation in some ways for to work with someone outside the rock and roll? In that
I know what you mean by that, but not I really wouldn't put it that way, but I can see that. So I'd think on that a little bit, but I didn't see it that way. We made the recording, and we were about to make our record, and we took the tape, rough mixes, to the small independent record label who was not interested in them. And I thought Philip was, we thought Philip was a big major star. He was a major star.
Right, totally.
Einstein on the Beach, changed music forever. But they didn't really like the collaboration or the idea of it. So it didn't really, in that sense, it certainly wasn't a validation. But I can tell you one thing though, it was a real treat to find those tapes after so many years and listen to them, because we literally played, we played in the room together, and it was just an opportunity to do something new, to experiment.
It's a really great and hypnotic record, and like, where can people hear it, just so in case
well, it's going to come out on the vinyl is going to come out on a small label called Ramp Local, and the CD is available from Philip's online, and the downloads are available from Orange Mountain Music.
Okay.
On Philip's website.
Cool. Well, let's there's so many other things to talk about, but we're 40 minutes in. But let's skip ahead to another thing we and I were talking about too, which is also, you've had many adventures along the way, and certainly one of them was playing with the B-52s, where you were in the touring band for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you're telling me the fascinating story, and let's share it with the listeners, with the viewers, about when you joined them, and it was right before Love Shack took off.
Right.
It was an interesting moment that you got to observe. The B-52s were not a New York City band, but they were certainly beloved in the city, had a following, and so you were like almost. I always see you as someone who saw firsthand the rise of this music from the underground to those moments like Love Shack.
Yeah.
And, when like it kind of broke mainstream.
Well, sorry, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I saw one of the first B-52 shows in New York, and met them through the years of playing, like going down to Athens or other places. They were, that first B-52 single with Rock Lobster and 52 Girls, it just killed me. I love that sound. For me, it was like this perfect combination of a girl group, kind of like the Shangri-Las or something, with Iggy, the Stooges, you know.
With a little monster mash in there.
Yeah, and Fred, and it would be, Fred could go like that to being like Captain Beefheart. I mean, it was just an amazing sound. And so I was friendly with them, and Kate called me up and uh, and said, we're thinking about playing, and do you want to do it? And I didn't really audition. We just played, and we rehearsed for a little bit, and they were finishing up that record, and wanted to play the music. So Sarah Lee was playing, and the drummer was Zachary Alford.
They were adding to their touring band, in other words.
Right.
Right.
They had to change the sound a little bit because sadly, Ricky, the original guitar player, had died several years earlier. So they really didn't know what to do. And so, yeah, our first show was, if it wasn't CBGB's, that was one of them. And and Kate said, I think it's just going to be about 3 weeks. and we got in we had a little, we were riding in the van or the bus or whatever. And, the Love Shack, the record came out, and it started to take off. We didn't know that. But enough so that when we were playing, and it was very, behind the scenes, there was a world of the business that went right over my head. They knew they had a good record on their hands, I think, but we were just playing, and we were having fun and changing the set around and playing new things. And it was really new for those original members of the B-52s to have a band like us. They could really fall back on us. So it was kind of a new thing for them.
Right.
And I remember we flew back to New York and made the Love Shack video, and it went up like that. And all of a sudden it went from like playing little clubs to like being everywhere. I mean, it really went fast.
Yeah, wasn't there some in LA, right? Didn't your gigs in LA suddenly get upgraded?
Yeah, we were going to play the Roxy, and we were and it sold out. And then another night was added, and another night was added, and it was something like, well, maybe you should play the Hollywood Palladium, and then that sold out. I'm sure I'm missing a few details here, but essentially we played the Greek.
Wow.
And that was all of a sudden
an outdoor theater where of mainstream pop stars and talent and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, this was like, what? And I'll never forget that show. It was a great show. I mean, but we didn't really have a road manager, and we were, or maybe that's all we had. We had a road manager and a sound person and a crew, small crew. But I remember the announcers saying, and they said that we were from New York City, and from New York City, the B-52s, and Cindy going, is that us? I don't know. And this crowd just, and so they had built up so much goodwill over the years through those records. And I was just happy to be a part of it.
It must have been wild. I mean, that was, that single was huge, and it made them sort of pop stars in a way. And suddenly you guys are playing, well, you probably worked your way up to arenas. And what was that like to be part of that wild ride they were on?
Certainly didn't take it for granted. I mean, I never in a million years imagined anything like that to be possible. We played arenas. We played places I could never imagine playing all around the world. And the crowds really, really were ready for them. And, it's a big difference between playing in a like the Meadowlands or the Garden or something, and Fred just magically knowing how to, and really Kate and Cindy knowing how to make that crowd seem like they were in your living room.
Wasn't there some show like in South America too? Was it where everyone was singing along?
Man, yeah, you remembered that. Yeah, we were playing in Santiago. I mean, the shows got bigger and bigger in South America as well on the first time we went down there. And I just, to see a soccer stadium full of people singing along to Planet Claire.
Wow.
This band, I mean, I could never imagine. I mean, who would thought that would be mainstream, that kind of band? But it was. And I was pretty lucky to be a part of it.
Yeah. And you're immortalized in the Love Shack video, as you said.
More or less.
In the background playing the keyboards.
Yeah. Upstate. I remember it was quite a scene. That was a fun party.
Now, you stayed with them for 20 years, and at the same time, you started branching out into TV and film scoring and things like that. And you've done some great work, and Nurse Jackie and A Class of 3000, the Andre 3000 cartoon show. And how did you get into that world? And was that easy, or was that a challenge to kind of make that transition?
Well, a little bit of both. It was pretty naive, but the first cartoon that I scored is called Rocco's Modern Life, and Nickelodeon was a brand new network, and just starting to make things, and one of the producers at Nickelodeon was a Ray Beats fan.
There you go. A small world, I guess.
Yeah, lucky me. And so, and it just worked out. It was like scoring cartoons. I don't know how. I mean, Rocco is still on TV. That stuff is still on TV. And as big as the B-52s got, those cartoons really found a way into the vocabulary around the world too. And it was an opportunity for me to kind of play a different kind of music. It was kind of what I thought making an album was going to be like, only there were hundreds of them.
Right.
And you had to make a new one every week.
Did you have, like, for example, with Class of 3000, did you get to work closely with Andre 3000, or how does that work with that kind of a situation?
I wouldn't say that I worked closely with him, but we worked together. I mean, it was his show.
Right.
And I remember actually being, on Shelter Island at the time, and I submitted my first score to Andre, and he didn't like it. But he was so kind and so generous. I don't think he would have put it quite like that, but I don't think it was quite what he expected. And he basically gave me the direction that he wanted it to be. He said, "I'd like this to be more like me." And he was very sort of, delicate, just saying, "Hey, look, I'm an outcast. This is a hip hop band. I like the B-52s just fine, but we've got to meet somewhere." And so I was really more aware of. I certainly went out and tried to, and then we would push each other. I would say that more than working together. He would contribute a song for each episode, and some of those songs, the first couple songs, were great. But the deadlines were pretty brutal on that show as well. Right. He's not great with deadlines.
Oh, you musicians.
Yeah, right.
In the minutes we have about 7-8 minutes left, and we actually have a couple of questions coming in. So I'm going to throw them. One of them is for you.
Okay.
So, Jonathan, which may be your bandmate. Tell us a story about your suits.
Ah,
question.
well, I'm assuming you're talking about the Ray Beats.
Exactly. You're very sharp dressed men, as they say.
Yeah. And Jim Sclavunos is, who was a drummer in Eight-Eyed Spy, and he was in Teenage Jesus also. His sister was at the Fashion Institute. And one of us just said, well, let's get some suits made. If Jim's sister can make them, let's do it. And we found this blue shark skin material and went for it. It was not cool. And then once we did it, it was like, oh no, we're in. And so we would be playing in London, and we've got more suits there, and it just kind of took off. But if you're an instrumental band, you got to have suits. I think of Booker T and the MGs in the Monterey movie. They come to mind, and the classic Booker T and the MGs live in Europe. I stared at that cover, just to stand the way Steve Cropper, stood. But the suits had an impact too.
Right. We have another question from, let's see here, from Steve. Can you share what venues you enjoyed going to? This is for both of us, but I'll throw this at you, Pat. What venues you enjoyed seeing music in the city before COVID hit?
Well, I'd like to hear your take on that as well. But I seem in the city now, I seem to end up at Poisson Rouge all the time. Whether it's seeing my friends the Bush Tetris play there or who, I always seem to end up there. But there's the Issue Project Room in Brooklyn. I love seeing bands there or music there. But mostly, Baby's All Right. Oh, there's that great new place in the Sultan Room.
Mm-hmm.
The Mercury Lounge. I mean, I'll go if there's a band that I want to see, I'll go there.
Right.
What about you?
I was going to say Poisson Rouge, which was one of the last shows I saw that was there before the thing, which was Thurston Moore and his instrumental band.
Oh, cool!
Did a terrific show. I always enjoyed Joe's Pub for a different kind of experience. Bowery Ballroom.
Oh,
was like that. That's a terrific one. But it was funny when I went to that Poisson Rouge show, which was probably a little over a year ago. At the same time, I remember walking there, taking the subway downtown, walking along Bleecker Street on my way there, and it sounded very sad. And this was before the virus hit, and all the legendary clubs down there in that strip that are now gone.
Yeah.
And they're now bars or banks or drugstores or whatever. From Folk City, like you mentioned, to the Bitter End is still there, but there was a point there, when I came here in '78, and even then people were saying, "Oh, the Village is over, it's finished." But even back then, there were so many clubs to go see live music, even in that little area, and it was basically at that point just Poisson Rouge and the Bitter End across the street.
Right.
So, when I first saw that question there from Steve, I thought, how many places were left even, compared to the old days? But there are still some,
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, there's a whole world of clubs, and whenever there's music, there's going to be clubs or places to play, and there's great places in Brooklyn. I remember there was a little venue, the Rod and Gun Club. Just weird, odd little places. I'm looking forward to coming back.
Here's another question for you, Pat, from Robert. How difficult is it mindset-wise to transition from bands and studios to TV and movies, and TV and film?
It's a little tricky. And I made a lot of mistakes early on that I wished I hadn't made. when I started working in film and TV, in that the score is not about, the music is important, but that's not all there is. It's not about me. It's not just about the music. There's a whole nother, apparatus. There's a whole nother world of editors, but even, in production, like, just say the writing and the camera work and then later the editing and the sound design and the sound editing and the dialogue editing, it all sort of comes together, and the music is just one small part of it. And without going into too much detail, that took a little adjusting to. That mindset is different. When you're in a band, you're in your gang, you're the center of the universe. You're the only thing going on.
When you score like Nurse Jackie or something, is the filming all done, or do you get a script in advance? How does that work?
It can be both, and it often is. It's sometimes a combination. It'll happen like I like getting scripts if we're at that place in the production. Sometimes I'll get a scene with a rough cut, and I'll try to work on it to help them edit and finish the cut. And then many times it's just, okay, here it is, go. But I've the last couple shows that I've worked on, Bored to Death and then Feed the Beast, Nurse Jackie, I've been a part of it, the process more. So get to establish kind of a vocabulary as we're going along.
What are you working on these days? What's coming up? Well, first of all, I should mention to people that the Sus album Promise, which is your current band, I guess we could call it that, is really terrific. It's like beautiful ambient country music, instrumental country music with lots of great kind of pedal steel guitar and guitar work, and I highly recommend that to people. It's probably a great like midwinter listen. It's like something the time of year. It's a great time to hear it. But what else are you working on these days?
Well, Sus has new material that we're working on. I'm actually working on a music theater piece that's going to be in production in Australia and New Zealand, starting to go into rehearsals based on, I didn't really talk about it, but I wrote music based on traditional American shape note singing, which is a form of choral singing, hymns based on the primitive Baptist hymnal. And this writer wanted to compose a theater piece based on that. So I'm just finishing that up. And then I've just, I'm a little embarrassed to put it this way, but it's sort of true. I finished up some demos for a television show, and I'm sitting at the edge of my seat waiting to hear. And but I had to sign whatever that is, that kind of agreement where I don't talk about it. But
NDA, probably.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Is it what kind of a show is it? Can you tell us that?
It's a big cable TV show.
Wow. Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah, and there now when as far as Sus goes, were you guys did you have shows lined up?
No.
Last year
we made it. We made a. I'm sorry. Excuse me. We made a movie of us playing the music from Promise. We got a gallery space in Long Island City, Queens, that were my neighborhood, and where my studio is, and there's a really, really, really cool art community there in that neighborhood, and this space basically lent us the Plaxel Gallery, lent us the space. We set up and we performed the record for the first time.
Wow.
And we made a movie of it, and we're trying to finish it up now.
Okay. And hopefully you'll do some shows whenever that's possible.
Man, I hope so. I mean, I miss it. I miss hanging out with my friends. I miss hearing live music. I miss playing it. But we'll come out of it. It'll happen.
What's the last show you saw before all this?
Oh, I think at Poisson Rouge, I saw the Bush Tetras.
Okay. That's funny. We both our last shows at the same club.
Yeah, right.
Actually, now that I think about it, my actually last one was 2 days before the city was shut down. There was an Allman Brothers tribute concert at the Madison Square Garden.
Oh my!
People who used to be in the Allman Brothers, the surviving members, doing a sort of a tribute to them and to Greg Allman for their, I think it was the 50th anniversary of the band. So it was, Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks and all these people who were kind of in the later band. And it was actually quite good, although it was a little nerve-wracking because that was that Tuesday of that week when people were already starting to say, well, maybe people shouldn't go out yet. There was no clampdown. It was just like, I remember, taking my little thing of sanitizer with me to Madison Square Garden, and it was packed. And although it wasn't packed, you could tell it was sold out, but there were empty pockets here or there. So some people were staying home. And I remember thinking to myself, why am I here?
Yeah, right.
But, I stayed, I lucked out, I guess. It didn't.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad you're okay. I mean, incidentally, I don't want to, I know we're wrapping it up, but one of the many amazingly weird bills that the B-52s played on, we opened for the Allman Brothers.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Tell us more about that. It
was great. Man, the crowd wasn't there to see the B-52s. It's one of those big outdoor festival type shows. So I think Arizona, maybe we did it more than once. Phoenix comes to mind. We ran into Greg a couple times along the way, and he certainly knew who the B-52s were. But it was just fun. Just wild. Go for it. And we did our thing. They did their thing. That was about it.
Did you get any interactions with them?
Yes. I guess, at the risk of, Greg Allman had the strongest pot I've ever smoked in my whole life. I'm not a big pot smoker, but this flattened me. It was like, whoa. It was like, this is, I'm gonna die. It was amazing. He's pretty quiet. He didn't really say a whole lot.
Right. Well, I think our time is about up, Pat. As I'm just looking at the clock here, and hey, Jocelyn.
Oops.
Nope. Can't hear you.
I always do that. I just wanted to say thank you. And I feel like there are 300 more stories that are unheard that I want to hear. Too bad, time is limited, but thank you both so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It was, I loved hearing those stories too, especially right up to that last one about the Allman Brothers.
I know.
You never know. You just never know what these stories are there.
Brought back a lot of memories.
Yeah.
And hopefully there'll be more memories made, in the future. And thanks, David, for being, so cool with, you obviously spent a little bit of time doing some work on this, and you opened it up for me. It's really nice. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
It was great. Yeah, a lot of these questions I've always wanted to ask you, so I finally got that chance.
Cool. And
But
thanks, Jocelyn.
maybe we'll.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And people that, let people know that we recorded it and it will be up on YouTube, so you can revisit it or tell your friends to check it out, probably, within a week on our YouTube channel.
Will do.
Definitely.
Great.
All right. Thanks again, and good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks,
And,
David.
bye-bye.
We'll see you on down the road, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Rock.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank
Yeah.
you.